What you're about to see will absolutely shock you to your core. The Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, was just chased out of a country town by a convoy of massive tractors driven by furious farmers who've had enough of his government's lies and broken promises. This wasn't some polite political disagreement, this was raw, unfiltered Australian anger exploding in the face of a Prime Minister who's completely lost touch with the people who actually feed this nation. The footage coming out of Ballarat is absolutely incredible, and if you think you've seen political protest before, you haven't seen anything like this. Picture this, the Prime Minister's black motorcade speeding down the Midland Highway like they are fleeing a crime scene, followed by a thundering convoy of tractors, harvesters, and farm machinery that stretches as far as the eye can see. These aren't your garden variety political protesters, these are the backbone of rural Australia, and they are absolutely done with being ignored, patronised, and lied to by Canberra bureaucrats. But here's the part that will make your blood boil. Albanese's office is trying to spin this disaster as a productive dialogue with regional stakeholders. Productive dialogue? The man was literally run out of town by people whose livelihoods his policies are destroying. The arrogance is breathtaking, and it perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with modern Australian politics. Let me take you inside what actually happened at the Ballarat Bush Summit, because the mainstream media is already trying to sanitize this story and protect their precious Prime Minister from the consequences of his own failures. This wasn't supposed to be a hostile environment, this was an annual gathering where farmers, regional business owners, and politicians come together to discuss rural issues. Albanese rolled up expecting the usual scripted photo ops and softball questions, but instead walked into a political tsunami that's been building for years. From the moment the Prime Minister stepped onto that stage, you could cut the tension with a knife. These farmers had driven 4 hours, some traveling hundreds of kilometers, not for a meet and greet with a politician, but to finally confront the man whose policies are literally putting them out of business. Their faces told the story before anyone even spoke. Years of frustration, economic hardship, and political abandonment written across the weathered features of people who work 16-hour days to keep this country fed. When Albanese was asked about protecting regional communities during the energy transition, his response was so tone-deaf, so completely disconnected from reality, that it triggered an explosion of anger that had been simmering for months. Here's exactly what he said, and I want you to listen carefully to every condescending word. There are a couple of things that we have to recognize. One is that there hasn't been a new coal-fired power station begun this century. That's just the truth, and there hasn't been any regulation stopping that. Did you hear that? That's just the truth. Like he's lecturing children who don't understand basic facts. This is a man telling farmers who are watching their electricity bills triple that coal power stations are being built because of market forces, not government interference. The jeers that erupted weren't random heckling, they were the sound of people who've had enough of being gaslit by their own government. But Albanese wasn't done insulting their intelligence. He continued with this absolute gem: if someone wants to build a coal-fired power station, they can go and do it. It hasn't happened because the market has determined that it doesn't stack up. We do need energy, and the cheapest form of new energy is renewables. That's when a farmer in the crowd couldn't take it anymore and shouted back, "We don't want it." And that single voice became a chorus of hundreds of voices, all expressing the same sentiment: stop lying to us. Stop pretending that your green energy revolution isn't destroying our way of life. What happened next was pure Australian political theatre at its most authentic. As Albanese tried to continue his prepared talking points about renewable energy being cheaper and more efficient, the crowd grew increasingly hostile. These weren't professional protesters with printed signs and coordinated chants, these were real people expressing genuine economic desperation and political betrayal. The Prime Minister, clearly rattled by the unexpected resistance, attempted to regain control by doubling down on his talking points. But every statistic he cited about renewable energy costs, every promise about green jobs and sustainable development, was met with louder jeers and more vocal opposition. You could see the exact moment when his media handlers realized this photo op had turned into a complete disaster. Here's what really happened that the media won't tell you. Albanese security detail started getting nervous when farmers began walking out of the venue, not to go home, but to get their tractors. Word spread through the crowd like wildfire: if the Prime Minister won't listen to them inside, maybe he'll pay attention when they follow his motorcade out of town. The exodus from the Bush Summit was unlike anything Australian politics has seen in decades. Hundreds of farmers streamed out of the venue and climbed into their tractors, combines, and heavy farm equipment. This wasn't planned or coordinated by political operatives. This was spontaneous rural rebel lion against a government that's completely lost touch with the people who actually produce Australia's wealth. What followed was absolutely extraordinary, a convoy of farm machinery that stretched 4 kilometers along the Midland Highway, following the Prime Minister's speeding motorcade like some kind of agricultural funeral procession for Australian rural communities. The symbolism was perfect, the people who feed the nation chasing away the politician who's starving them of affordable energy. But here's where this story gets even more infuriating. Albanese's response to this unprecedented display of rural anger was to double down on his renewable energy rhetoric. Instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, his policies are causing real hardship for real people, he dismissed the farmers' concerns as resistance to inevitable progress. The man literally got chased out of town by angry constituents and still couldn't admit that his approach might be wrong. The farmers who participated in this convoy weren't just upset about energy policy, they were expressing years of accumulated frustration with a government that talks about helping rural Australia while implementing policies that make farming unviable. These are people dealing with electricity costs that have skyrocketed since Labor took office, watching coal-fired power plants close while renewable alternatives prove unreliable and expensive. Take dairy farmers, for example. They need consistent, affordable electricity to run milking equipment, cooling systems, and processing facilities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When Albanese tells them that renewable energy is cheaper, they are looking at bills that tell a completely different story. Solar panels don't milk cows at midnight, and wind turbines don't run irrigation systems during still summer days when crops are dying of thirst. Grain farmers are facing similar challenges with drying and storage facilities that require massive amounts of reliable electricity. When harvest season comes, they can't wait for favorable weather conditions to power their operations. They need electricity now, consistently, at affordable rates. But Labor's energy policies prioritize ideological purity over practical reality. The most damaging part of Albanese's Ballarat disaster wasn't just his tone-deaf responses to legitimate concerns, it was his complete inability to understand why farmers are angry in the first place. When he cited market forces determining energy choices, he revealed a fundamental disconnect from the lived experience of rural Australians who've watched government policies distort those markets beyond recognition. Here's what the Prime Minister doesn't understand: farmers aren't opposed to renewable energy because they hate the environment or resist technological progress. They are opposed to forced transitions that ignore the practical realities of agricultural production. Many farmers would love to reduce their energy costs through solar or wind power, but current renewable technologies can't meet their specific operational requirements. The convoy that followed Albanese out of Ballarat represented something much bigger than energy policy disagreements. It was a rolling symbol of rural Australia's growing political alienation. These farmers feel abandoned by both major parties, but Labor's combination of green ideology and urban focus has created particular resentment in regional communities. What made this protest so powerful was its authenticity. There were no professional organizers, no corporate sponsors, no political action committees, just farmers who'd had enough and decided to make their voices heard in the most Australian way possible, by jumping on their tractors and making some noise. The image of that convoy rolling down the highway will become iconic in Australian political history. The aftermath of the Ballarat confrontation reveals everything wrong with contemporary Australian politics. Instead of reflecting on why his message was so poorly received, Albanese immediately retreated to friendly media outlets to defend his renewable energy agenda. His staffers briefed journalists about the productive dialogue and the importance of transitioning to clean energy, completely ignoring the fact that their boss was literally chased out of town. Meanwhile, the farmers who participated in the convoy went back to their properties to deal with the same problems that motivated their protest in the first place: skyrocketing electricity bills, unreliable power supply, and a government that seems more interested in international climate commitments than domestic food production. The Ballarat incident exposes the massive gap between Labor's rhetoric about helping working Australians and the reality of their policies' impact on rural communities. When the Prime Minister talks about job creation in renewable energy sectors, farmers hear about urban employment opportunities that don't exist in their regions. When he promises lower energy costs through green technology, they see bills that keep increasing. This convoy protest also revealed something crucial about rural political sentiment that mainstream media consistently misses: farmers aren't stupid, and they are not easily fooled by political spin. They understand market economics better than most politicians because their livelihoods depend on making smart financial decisions every single day. When Albanese claims renewable energy is cheaper while their costs keep rising, they know they are being lied to. The visual of hundreds of tractors following the Prime Minister's motorcade perfectly captured the power dynamic in modern Australia, urban politicians making decisions that rural communities have to live with, whether they like it or not. But for once, those rural communities said enough and made their displeasure impossible to ignore. What happens next will determine whether the Ballarat convoy becomes a turning point in Australian politics or just another ignored rural protest. If Labor continues dismissing farmers' concerns as resistance to progress, they risk creating a permanent political divide between urban and rural Australia that could reshape the entire political landscape. The farmers who chased Albanese out of Ballarat sent a clear message: stop treating us like obstacles to your green revolution and start acknowledging that food production is just as important as renewable energy production. Whether politicians in Canberra got that message remains to be seen, but one thing's certain: rural Australia is done being ignored. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Australian News CC family where the real stories come to life. See you in the next one.